Get ready to rev your engines and embark on a thrilling journey through the evolution of speed in Formula One. From the roaring V10 engines to the introduction of hybrid power units and groundbreaking aerodynamic changes, this video will take you on the epic evolution of speed. So let's dive into this exciting exploration of the history of Formula One. Here we begin. Formula One racing has its roots in the European Grand Prix championships of the 1920s and 1930s. However, the modern Formula One as we know it began to take shape in 1946 when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, FIA, established standardized rules for the sport. These rules laid the foundation for the World Championship of Drivers, officially introduced in 1950. The birth of Formula One, 1946 to 1950. In 1946, the FIA defined Formula One as international motorsport's premier single-seater racing category. It was initially known as Formula A, Formula One, or Formula One, while the smaller Voiturate formula was called Formula B, Formula 2, or Formula 2. The introduction of Formula 3 in 1950 completed the trio of officially recognized international formulae: Formula 1, Formula 2, and Formula 3. During this period, the formula was based on engine capacity with efforts to balance supercharged and normally aspirated cars. Pre-war 4.5-liter Grand Prix cars could race alongside 1.5-liter supercharged Voiturates, while pre-war 3-liter supercharged Grand Prix cars were prohibited. The first Formula One race is a subject of debate, with contenders like the 1946 Turin Grand Prix and the 1947 Swedish Winter Grand Prix. But the 1947 Paul Grand Prix is widely considered the first official Formula One race.
Feels good. Can't wait to see what this new car's capable of.
The era of factory Italian and Mercedes front-engine cars and rare mid-engine revolution, 1950 to 1961. In the early years of Formula One, Italian teams like Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, and Maserati were the strongest contenders. The FIA created the first World Championship for drivers in 1950, including major European races and the famous Indianapolis 500. Alfa Romeo dominated the 1950 season with their powerful Alfetta 15/8s, winning every race except the Indianapolis 500. Nino Farina and Juan Manuel Fangio became champions in those early years. However, Alfa Romeo withdrew from racing due to a lack of funding. 1958 races were shortened, and a new cup for F1 manufacturers was introduced. Mike Hawthorne became the first English driver to win the Drivers' Championship, and the British Vanwall team took the Constructors' Championship. Stirling Moss achieved a significant victory in 1958, driving a mid-engine Cooper, which marked the first triumph for a rear mid-engine car in Formula One. With their rear mid-engine cars, the British teams continued to excel, outperforming the front-engine cars from Ferrari and others. However, tragedy struck in 1961 when a crash at Monza claimed the life of Wolfgang von Trips and several spectators. The British specialist teams like Lotus, Cooper, and BRM showed that fresh thinking and competitiveness mattered more than the industrial might of major manufacturers. While Ferrari dominated in 1961 with their rear mid-engine car, the British teams faced challenges catching up. Fiddle Hill became the champion, but the season was marred by the tragic accident at Monza. Anglophone drivers and 1.5-liter engines, 1962 to 1967. In 1962, the Lotus team introduced a groundbreaking car called the Lotus 25, powered by the Coventry Climax F-V V8 engine. It had an innovative aluminum sheet monocoque chassis instead of the traditional space frame design. However, the car faced reliability issues initially. Eventually, the Lotus and driver Jim Clark succeeded, winning the championship twice in 3 years. The DFV engine, 12-cylinder engines, and the arrival of sponsorship, safety, and aerodynamics, 1968 to 1976. In the late 1960s, McLaren joined Formula One and sponsorship restrictions were lifted, allowing teams to display logos on their cars. Innovations like wings and full-face helmets were introduced. Lotus dominated, but tragedy struck when Jim Clark died in a race. The 1970s brought safety improvements and larger wings. Lotus, McLaren, and Ferrari were the top teams, with drivers like Fittipaldi, Stewart, and Lauda winning championships. Ground effect era and 1.5-liter turbocharged engine 1977 to 1993. Lotus introduced the ground effect with the Lotus 78, generating increased downforce. Renault introduced the first turbocharged engine. Lotus continued to push boundaries with the Lotus 79, while Brabham used a controversial fan car. Moreover, turbo engines became the focus, reaching over 1,350 brake horsepower. Turbocharger restrictions were introduced for fairness. Lauda, Prost, and Senna had intense rivalries, producing close finishes and memorable moments. The dominance of turbo engines ended with the introduction of atmospheric engines in 1987 and a complete ban on turbos in 1989. The 1980s were an exciting period in Formula One history. Later, 1989, turbocharged engines were banned and Formula One switched to naturally aspirated engines up to 3.5 liters. McLaren Honda continued their dominance, with Alain Prost winning the title in 1989 and Ayrton Senna taking the championship in 1990 and 1991. The Japanese manufacturers' V10 and V12 engines proved as powerful as the turbocharged engines before them. However, their intense rivalry led to clashes on the track. The early 1990s saw the introduction of electronic driver aids such as active suspension, semi-automatic gearboxes, and traction control. These technologies increased speeds but also raised concerns about the role of technology over driver skills. The FIA imposed regulations in 1994 to curb the influence of these aids. Safety, Rules, and Regulations, 1994. The 1994 season became a turning point for safety in Formula One. Tragic accidents resulted in the deaths of Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna. The FIA swiftly implemented major changes to improve safety. Rules were introduced to reduce power, limit downforce, and enhance cockpit protection. The wooden plank beneath the cars was introduced to monitor wear and maintain fair competition. 3-liter engines, 1995 to 1999. In 1995, the regulations were further adjusted by introducing a larger cockpit area and head protection. Michael Schumacher joins Ferrari, marking the beginning of their rebuilding phase. Williams, led by Damon Hill and later Jacques Villeneuve, emerged as a strong contender. Mika Hakkinen claimed 2 consecutive titles for McLaren Mercedes. The privateer teams began to face difficulties and many iconic names disappeared from the grid, signaling a shift in the sport's landscape. V10 engines and the rise of road car manufacturer participation, 2000 to 2005. In the early 2000s, Formula One saw the popularity of V10 engines as they offered a good balance between power and fuel efficiency. Ferrari and Michael Schumacher dominated the championships in 2000 and 2001. In 2002, Ferrari's dominance caused fan controversy and dissatisfaction, leading to declining ratings and attendance. During this period, major car manufacturers like BMW, Honda, Ford, Renault, Toyota, and Mercedes became more involved in Formula One. However, smaller independent teams faced difficulties and some of them disappeared. 2.4-liter V8 engines, 2006 to 2008. In 2006, Formula One switched to using 2.4-liter V8 engines. The season saw a competitive battle between Renault and Ferrari, with Fernando Alonso and Michael Schumacher fighting for the championship. Alonso secured back-to-back titles for Renault in 2005 and 2006. The 2007 season was marked by a fierce rivalry between McLaren teammates Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen ultimately won the championship, while Ferrari secured the Constructors' title. This season also saw the end of traction control in Formula One. 2008 McLaren and Ferrari remained strong, but the season became more open with wins from other teams. Hamilton claimed the Drivers' Championship in a thrilling finale, securing the title in the final moments of the last race. Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship. Cost-cutting measures and departure of car manufacturers, 2009 to 2013. In the late 2000s, Formula One cars became incredibly advanced and reliable, making it difficult for drivers to overtake and resulting in less exciting races. To address this, new rules were introduced in 2009 to encourage more overtaking. Engine revolutions per minute limits were imposed, and teams experimented with a new energy recovery system called KERS, which stored energy from braking to boost acceleration. However, due to the global economic recession, cost-cutting measures were implemented and many car manufacturers left the sport. Introduction of 1.6-liter turbocharged V6 hybrid power units and ground effect cars with aerodynamic changes, 2014 to 2021 to present. Formula One entered a new era in 2014 by introducing 1.6-liter turbocharged V6 hybrid power units. Mercedes emerged as the dominant team, winning multiple championships with drivers Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel also became strong contenders, but Mercedes maintained their superiority. In 2021, Red Bull challenged Mercedes for the titles, with Max Verstappen ultimately winning the Drivers' Championship. In 2022, the FIA implemented aerodynamic changes to promote closer racing. Ground effect, which had been used since 1983, was reintroduced to create downforce and reduce the negative impact of dirty air on trailing cars. Simplified exteriors, redesigned front wings, and higher rear wings were among the changes made to the cars. These modifications allowed for more overtaking opportunities and improved followability. So, what do you think of the history of the speed of Formula One? Comment below and subscribe for more.